Hi, Ernie.
Hey, how you doing?
All
Hold on,
right.
turn
This
this up
is
a bit.
one of the few rooms we got that's air conditioned, so I'm doing all right.
I've been out all day. Oops, hold on. I've been out all day. Well, first mowing lawns this morning with Paula on her rounds, and then getting ready for Saturdays. We're burying my son Saturday, so
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, all my best with that. That's a tough one.
it doesn't seem to ever end. I mean, it's 6 months after he's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. Um,
I just there's always something else that I have to attend to.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you work remotely, or do you have to go to an office?
I'm all remote. I haven't set foot in the office in 4 years.
Wow.
I'm at 3 days a week now, but a couple times I've gone to the office maybe 3 or 4 times, but it's usually at night to like switch computers, or I have gone in actually a couple times to like talk to IT or figure something out that had to be done on network. But
What do you do? You work at Fuji, right?
yeah,
What do you do there?
right now I tapered. I was VP of product development for a number of years. Now I do primarily, well, my title is product and technology planning, which at this point is a lot of IP, managing all our IP stuff,
Yep.
all the, and then some that leads into technology planning and things like that. So it's fun. It's a good thing to do 3 days a week. You can do it remotely, so it's a good gig.
I one time years ago, I was in law school at the time, but it was summertime, so I was working. And I don't know if you've ever met David Wright.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I know, David.
he and I would had a partnership, and we would do projects together. I was the mechanical guy, and he'd be the electrical guy, or electronics, or he'd do the sort of ethereal stuff, and I do
Yeah,
the stuff that
yeah,
you touch.
yeah. Yeah, I remember we definitely had some projects.
There was this one of them was a 40-to-1 scale printer head that we built or I
Oh,
built.
I remember that, I think.
It's
That
like a
was
bunch of organ pipes, all of the same note.
Yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah. Interesting. Hi, Mary.
Hello.
That's a it's a good place to be if you can get a breeze.
Where's that?
If you're getting a breeze, that's a good place to be.
Yeah, I'm on the Cape. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, yeah, it's probably a lot cooler. If you're close
It's actually,
enough to
I've
the
got my
ocean.
sweatshirt here. I'm going to put it on soon. It's lovely.
All right. That's great. All right. Well, I think it's all yours. We've certainly
Okay.
performed. I would ask, I can see there's one person signed on as iPad 4. Now, just from our policies with the PC and so forth, it would be good to know who that is. So if you would decloak yourself for a minute and just tell us your name, that would be helpful. Is
Hey,
that, are
Jim.
you, hi Jay, but you're not iPad 4, are you? You're separate.
Correct.
So somebody's just there under just iPad. Maybe they're not even seeing four. So,
Yeah.
so here we go. The people on the list are who are not on the committee: Linda Gray, Dan and Jen Goulet, Kathleen Shepard, Mary Albert, Jay Benson, and then there's one. So, who is the person we didn't call on? Maybe is somebody using a secondary device for audio?
I don't know. But if I don't hear anything, I can put in waiting room. We'll see who hollers.
Hi,
Oh,
can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, now we can.
Okay, I'm Zara Reeves. And it could be that I'm iPad 4, I don't know.
Yeah, you are.
You
It's
must be.
highlighting that, so thank
Okay. Here I am,
Okay, all right,
you.
all right, thank you. I
finishing
just,
supper.
as the person taking the minutes, I need to know. Thank you. Okay, so we're all set, Mary.
Okay, so first thing to do is approve the agenda. Does that comment?
Hey, Joey.
I would move to approve the agenda as written.
Second,
Okay, then all in favor, aye, because we
Aye.
all,
Yeah.
great. Any public comments for items not on the agenda? Okay. Not seeing any. That's the correspondence. I think that really is all going to be part of the next discussion of the proposed edits to the town plan. But just to be clear, we set out a request and inviting people to comment on the proposed changes to the town plan, and we'll get to that. And I received well, Mary Albert had sent copies in that were in the last packet, so we put them back in again just to keep everything together. And then Linda Gray provided an email, and Charlie Lindler. So those are the comments that I received, and so those have been shared. So let's go on to the fourth agenda item, which really is, I think, the meat of the discussion tonight. And there are a number of new people here, so probably worthwhile to kind of step back and just, as members of the Planning Commission, talk a little bit about this project that we've undertaken and the parameters of it, and what we are striving to do and what we're striving not to do. This is not a rewrite of the town plan. It's not a rewrite of philosophy or kind of broadly statements about the town plan. What this group is looking at is within the context of solar siting, it became apparent in a number of times that it wasn't clear what the role of the committee was and how should it take and assess proposals that come to it. And so the goal is to look at the town plan and look at places where it indicates regulatory decision making but is not clear on it, and to clarify that. And so in many regards, the outtake of this would be greater clarity, both for applicants as well as for the town plan, about how to review proposals. What are the areas they're supposed to be reviewing? And in which case, what are the parameters of the review? So it's very surgical and very much looking at how to change language to be clearer for people. It could be that out of this, there's a rubric of some sort that says, here's what we look at when we get a proposal. Ernie, Jan, any additional comments?
Oh, yeah, just because, and that's one reason I wrote that one pager, because if you try to look at the edits and you're sifting through 35 or 40 pages to find this bit or this bit that's changed, and it gets to the question of, are there policy changes, or is it language clarification, and where, how does that line, where is that line? And so I just went through both the document and the minutes and pulled out the what looked like the substance of the edits. And clearly, I mean, I agree that the key point is we're not rewriting the town plan. It's a very limited section thereof that is being updated, and there are definitely needs to clarify the language relative to being the only document you're allowed to use in net metering applications. But if I look at the document, so I kind of would ask the group first to to check and see whether the summary that I put together is accurate in terms of what the edits do. But if I look at it, in some cases, I would call them policy changes, you know, I think taking away the default preferred citing for the bulk of the town, you know, yeah, you're clarifying the language where solar can go, but I would call that a policy statement. Whether if you talk about ridge lines or slopes of a certain pitch, and the language said may or could or something vague, and we make it say not or can't, you're clarifying the language, but you're also affecting policy. So I think it's worth talking about that a little bit up front here.
Ernie?
I don't have only like specific changes you know, I want to sort of think more about what I want to do right, you know, say at this point. But I mean, there's the only one that I think is kind of a thorn in my side, is the one that says something about slopes, that talks about slopes and that they shall not be steeper than 45 degrees. And I thought at 45, well, I can't remember if they say 45% or 45 degrees. I think they say 45 degrees. And I just, there's a problem with that. That's why they were no greater than 15 degrees or 25 degrees, whichever it's in the bylaws right now. I mean, in the regulations right now, because there was something about angle of repose, which doesn't really apply. The reason those lower, less steep slopes had to do with public safety and access, and to discourage sensitive, you know, discourage both what do you call it, erosion and other damage that can happen on, you know, steep slopes that are relatively susceptible to damage, and I'm going to say the word delicate because you know, so that particular change really is not proper. And should be removed because it has nothing to do with the angle of repose or any of that sort of stuff. It's those other issues.
And Jan, I want to thank you. Jan, I want to go back and talk a bit. I think part of the challenge, and this gets to Ernie's point as well, that you know, there was discussion that the concept that the entire town is permitted for the entire town is permitted for solar siting with a couple of exceptions, and then with the language not clearly defined. So Ernie, the plan prior to any edit said can't be on steep slopes, with no definition of what a steep slope is. And so you know, as we're thinking about how do you know, assess that, you know, trying to articulate that. So I went through a number of plans of many towns, and you saw 15, maybe 25%.
Yeah.
And so that was one edit. And then Mary, Albert, and with support from others that have written in since then have supported that 45. And that was, we wanted to put that there. Jay,
Right,
your hand's raised. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Ernie, please.
So, but our zoning regulations are I can't remember if it's subdivision or zoning, but one of the two actually says what a steep slope is, and I can't remember. I think we actually chose 12%. Well, 12%. I'm not quite sure what that translates to, but it's certainly a lot less than 45 degrees. 45 is really steep.
It's just a good point. Ernie makes a good point that relative to our purpose here, it may say it in the subdivision regs or the zoning bylaws, but one of the big learnings we've had in the last 6 months is those documents don't do us any good in net metering permitting applications. But it is a good point to say we might as well be consistent. If it's 25 somewhere, then if there's good reason for it to be a number somewhere and we want to put a number on it in the town plan, then start with the same number and go from there.
And there were a number of places where the town plan and the zoning were not aligned. Jay, you've had your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, one thing that I think in looking at the minutes and thinking about this issue, and I think it's great on what the committee is looking at. I think there's another question that I don't know if it's the subcommittee or how you fit it in, just around process. In the sense that if or in the case of the planning commission goes approve something, what also denotes a change in plan? And when should something come back for reconsideration? For instance, if it's approved once, does it mean it's greenfield and it's approved forever? Or if there's some change, what prompts it coming back? Because I think there's confusion to say, great, I got my preferred site letter, and then the site plan changes. And I think it all is around that definition, and I use air quotes here, of significant. But I think it's important for you all, as you're looking at trying to finalize these rules, of saying, when does that change enough that it should be reconsidered? Because I think with the cases that have been looked at in the last several years, I think that's one of the big confusions, is you might look at an initial proposal for 3 acres and say, great, sounds good, it's approved. It's changed to 8 acres. Is that a significant change? Is it not a significant change? And I don't know how that fits into this process, but I just want to make sure you think about how it might fit into the process.
Yeah, Jan.
Well, it's a very good point. And the key question is going to be how to do that in the rubric of how we look at citing things, how to do that. But now, how to do it in the context of the new 5100 rule that says you don't even look at a preferred citing request without the application being considerably further along than it used to be. So then it's going to be a different answer to your question than it might have been a year or two ago, because the planning commission will not be reviewing a preferred citing request until there's a pretty defined, they're calling it the 45-day application, but a much more defined application. But I agree that that's the rubric to what Mary's been calling the rubric for going through these permits. Definitely needs to clarify when is it valid to reopen.
I know, I think that's right. I think that the 5100 ruling really addresses the issue of what, has been viewed by folks as sort of a bait and switch. Here, approve this plan, and now, oh, look we've changed it significantly, and then getting it back is challenging. I see, Linda, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you. I have one very minor thing. I just wanted to note for you all, my very minor correction when you took my email and then put it into the packet, you made a minor mistake. It reads July 14th, whereas I submitted it, or I wrote
June,
it up on
you're right.
June.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I will make that change in the notes. It was
that's fine.
Trying to change it. It got goofy, but thank you. I'll make that change. Thank you.
And then separately, I do have a more substantive comment, which is that I recall that this subcommittee, the previous meeting, and it seems to me maybe last fall, in terms of process, that you talked about wanting to get broad feedback from people. So you put it out there, and individuals who are paying attention to postings and stuff like that are responding. But in addition, you all spoke about a kind of a outreach that you would do to, say, the Conservation Commission, the Energy Committee, the Historical Preservation Commission, that you would seek input from those other town groups on your edits. And so I just want to remind you of that. And I would propose that the way to do that is, at a certain point, you've got something that you want to share with these other groups, you do that, you give them at least a month, because they have to receive them and consider them at a meeting and stuff like that. Maybe longer and get feedback from them. I just wanted to highlight that to you all, and suggest that you pursue some kind of process like that.
Linda, we do have a process, and the process is to have the discussion right now in the subcommittee. The full planning commission has not taken a look at it, and we'd want to hear from them and get feedback at that point, and then go out more broadly for feedback. And we certainly want to hear from all citizens as well as people who are on those committees. So we will build that into the process, but this process has just started. In fact, I think this is maybe the third conversation we've had. Yeah, I think this is the third conversation that's happened in committee, which is obviously well posted and publicized. And the expectation is it will be on the agenda of the next planning commission. And then we will seek broader input.
Right, that's what I wanted to speak to. We, the subcommittee, have been asked by the planning commission as part of our regular reports once a month. The planning commission said, okay, it sounds like you've got enough meat to come back to us with something specific that they can look at. So that's what we want to do tonight, is basically get a packet ready to put in the packet for the planning commission meeting in July. And then depending how that conversation goes, the full commission may read it, look at it, talk about it, and say, you barely scratched the surface, subcommittee, go back and work on it some more. Or they may say, oh, let's put it out for public comment. There are lots of ways it could go. Yeah. Next step is for this group to put something to the full PC.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I would suggest that we do what we did at the last meeting, which is to go through the edits and get people's reactions, comments.
Can we just look? I'm curious to see, because I'd like to be able to go really quickly through the first half of what I had there, under proposed plan changes, and see whether they're accurate. Because I literally went through and stopped and said, okay, we took off default preferred solar for most of town, and then we made specific language on slopes, priority forest blocks, ridgeline, riparian, scenic, so if we just look through that short list, do we agree that is an accurate summary of the changes? And then maybe we can wrap back into the details. Is there anything there that the people on the committee look at and go, wait a minute, no, that's not what it says?
So we're looking at which page? Of
the packet, it's at the end, actually.
Yeah, let's go down. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's way at the end. Okay.
It's way at the end. It's in the packet, it's page 77.
Yep.
And so
yep.
I put just under proposed plan changes, was just going through the 35 pages, and every place we made a change, I said, oh, okay, what's the substance of that? What's the summary of that? And putting it all in one place. And it really, to your point, it's surgical, and it's not a full, right? Because you can summarize it in that short a period thing. But do people agree with that summary?
I agree with the summary.
Step back even one step. Do people agree it's worthwhile to do a summary? We could say,
yes.
You're just confusing things, Jan. Let's go to the big document. Okay,
no,
so if we agree,
I agree.
Then let's get it accurate.
So the one thing I would say is that I think both our comments from the Planning Commission as well as comments from the community have talked about the importance of identifying zones where people want to place solar. So sort of preferred zones. Mary Albert had put that in her comments. People who wrote in said they agreed with her comments. And I certainly put that in there as trying to identify specific zones that you would.
So that's what I mean by the third one. The third line, not under the bullets. Explicit creation of specific preferred areas and/or criteria where solar projects are encouraged.
Sorry. Okay.
That is the other side. We're clarifying where it shouldn't be, with specifics. And then we're saying it's not just no, 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 it's here, here, here. In whatever way is legitimate in 5100 and whatever we're allowed to do in enhanced energy plan. So that is the preferred line.
Yep.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Under
Please.
the open questions, it says how to address 500 kilowatt projects. And that's a pretty broad question. I'm not quite, so I'm curious.
So,
as-
so
So
here's,
what I saw in the, and I corrected it in my copy, but the current edited statement, I would move up above because it proposes to say they're not permitted. The current edit, right, Mary?
I saw that. I saw
so
that.
let me just step back a bit. So the town plan said nothing about
Right.
any solar installation of that scale. And so the question is, should there be a statement about it? And if so, what should that statement be? Because not saying anything would indicate that the town, or could be read that the town didn't have a policy on it. And if the town doesn't have a policy in the town plan, then we might imagine that how that might be interpreted by some. So it was,
the
let's
current
clarify.
edit,
Yeah.
right. And the current edited version now says no, says that projects over that size will not be permitted. Did I read that right?
Correct. That's correct.
So that should actually go up above the open
Yeah.
question. It should just say, as a proposed plan change, projects greater than 500 kW are not permitted. Then, and everything under that is proposed. I mean, let's be clear. This is just so that the planning commission and the public and everybody can look at a very short list and go, whoa, I don't agree with that. Or, yeah, that makes sense.
Should we explain why they're not permitted too? I mean, because that's a question I have is, I mean, I suspect I know why, and I certainly have my own opinions, but I'd like to hear what the formal reason is for not having them bigger than, or I think the public should know what the formal reason is, just not simply that they're not permitted, but why.
It would be just a scale for a town of the size of Norwich to put in something that scale would be out of character.
It might be out of it might be out of character, so we should say that then, because there are plenty of towns that might say, well, hey, that'd be good for business, there'd be jobs, whatever number of reasons they want to say. So we should be pretty clear why it's
Okay.
that it kind of define. And when you say it's not it doesn't fit Norwich, how you just phrased it, it really is that there are things in the town plan already that say what we want Norwich, Vermont to be. It's kind of aesthetic, it's kind of philosophical, but those are real things. Those are still real reasons why people want it to be that way. So we should explain that and maybe even refer people to those sections that say, this is what we want this town to be. We don't want it to be an industrial wasteland. We want it to be as close to a rural town as it can be, considering, changes that are necessary due to the times.
Very good. Okay. Okay, so getting back, Jan, to your comments, it seems like there's agreement that summary is helpful and that summary works.
Okay.
And I agree.
So I would move the 500 kW just because it's in there to be consistent between the long document and the summary. We should move the greater than 500 kW up into proposed plan changes and say the proposed changes, projects of that size should not be permitted in Norwich. And then there's still the open questions are still there. I added one as I was going through it, which was we need to update the energy data, including the renewable targets, the present level of generation, all that stuff needs to be updated. And a lot of that will be necessary to get an enhanced energy plan. I mean, this is really the tip of the iceberg of getting the clarity and the comprehensiveness that we need to have an enhanced energy plan. And clearly we have to update all that data as part of doing that.
Mary Albert.
A 500 kilowatt would require about 3 acres, which is about the size of my yard. So I object to your saying that's an industrial wasteland. Let's be more accurate in our language. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Should we review the more detailed? Oh, Jay, please.
I just, in regards to the last comment, we're seeing 500 kilowatt sites that are 8 or 9 acres. So I just want to balance your comment.
I'd just
Thank
like to
you.
say that what I meant by industrial wasteland is a much bigger than 500. That was what I was getting at. There are some that are tens. There's nothing. There's in a practical sense, there's almost nothing to stop them if somebody wants to permit a much bigger one, megawatts, mini megawatts installation.
Yeah,
the
danger of having it just say greater than means, 10 megawatts is greater than 500, just like 501 is.
So that's what I meant by industrial wastelands. I wasn't talking about a 500 kilowatt one being an industrial wasteland, or 8 or 10 or whatever number of acres. I just meant something much bigger. If we say we can put whatever number we want. I didn't mean 500. I'm excited about solar on one hand. On the other hand, I don't want it to take over the rural nature of the town. But I think there's a nice balance between solar and rurality. And I think it's proper that there's a nice. I'd love to see it on people's houses too, instead of just on fields. But no one seems to be paying attention to that particular application right at the moment, and I don't really understand why. But anyway, that's me being a technoid.
Linda Gray.
I thank you to follow up on Jan's comment about enhanced energy planning. I would like to encourage you all to try to do that and to follow the guidelines for that. And that gets to some of the points I made in my comments. The other thing that I would like to say is that I would suggest if you end up succeeding in identifying areas, the limited areas in Norwich that are near three-phase power right now, right. And if you wish to follow the guidance that, indicates that we have and we ought to respect some renewable generation targets in our town, that precluding a 500 kilowatt project is self-defeating, because vaguely you talked about like the land between the interstate and River Road. There's a lot of land there, and it's where that K&M, it's the old Leonard Cook barn, and K&M is operating, well, I don't know what kind of operation it is, but there's a zillion trucks and equipment and stuff like that. And so I've looked at that site many, many times and thought, hey, maybe, I don't know the details of it, but maybe that would be great for a medium to large-ish solar project. And if you guys are saying, if you end up proposing that nothing like that ever be built in Norwich, I kind of feel like you're shooting our plans and our ability to meet our generation targets, you're shooting them in the foot.
Well, I think that's the point of the planning commission even having to deal with this, because we can specify, over the course of this process, we could specify very, very particular places where we think that they would be appropriate such as a place like that, you know? I mean, I think I would love to see them running up and down the middle, the medians of the highways. Where no one can do anything else with the land anyways, and it's already a brownfield. So why not use the land for that too? Anyways, the point is that, yeah, that's our job, is to, is there any place appropriate that something even bigger could go? And if with that case, then we would be able to say, no, nothing over 500 kilowatt, except if it's in these particular
Mhm.
places elsewhere. We can do that. I'm not sure. I don't know. I haven't any ideas of where one of those places would be, but other than the one that was just mentioned, but maybe there are. And you know, maybe we ought to consider that. I don't know.
Mary? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, already we can see that the 500 kilowatt is sticking as a number, and already we've heard that that is too low a number. So if you want to put a number in there, it has to be some kind of megawatt at least. The 500
Okay,
kilowatt as a specific number is not appropriate.
Okay.
There is I believe there's a net metering reason that people talk about 500, that does 5100 stop it at 500 kW? There, I mean, when you get to those big sites, I think the rules change too. And I'm not sure even how an enhanced energy plan from a town is used. If somebody had a 1 megawatt or a 1.5 megawatt site, commercial site, does it play by different rules? And we would need to know that as part of specifying things.
You know,
So-
I think a lot of the stuff in the last comments is just to think about maybe it's size of area more so than size of solar, especially if you think about technology change and Moore's law and compression of the size of things. Is maybe this is much more of an impact on the landscape as opposed to the power capability of the site. For thought.
Thank you. Rob Gear?
I just wanted to, same comment, technology might increase the density, power output density of solar panels to a point where they're double what they are now. And so limiting on the basis just of the power output ties into the net metering rules, but it doesn't really have an application as far as acceptable use of land in Norwich. So the likelihood is if somebody is doing something larger than 500 kilowatt, the regulations that they have to adhere to are much more stringent, and it becomes a different level and much less likely to happen without the net metering benefits.
Yep. This one comment is that again, the new laws out from the PUC are restricting the size of clear cuts for sure on the net metering to 3 acres, significantly different from, certainly different than the project that is under review from our town right now at 8.2 acres of a clear cut. So that's, that at least is going to help in terms of how these projects get viewed. Jay, is your hand still up, or is it a new comment, or same? Was that just you forget to take it down? Must have forgotten to take it down. Okay, thanks. So we have comments. I don't know whether people have had a chance to go through the document. We tried to make it very transparent around the changes that were made and edits that were made. Those in red were made by the Planning Commission. Those in purple were made by citizen comments. And so we wanted to be explicit about that so people could understand what was happening. And I don't know whether we go through page by page or whether we ask if there are any areas that people would like to discuss, and then if not, go to the places where there's some differences.
Just to clarify, when you said made by the Planning Commission, at this stage, made
Sorry,
by
the solar
subcommittee.
siting, the subcommittee. Thank you. You're right. Thank you. Okay, why don't we just why don't we go to the areas then where there's then comment.
Substantial, yeah, I mean, if you go to page,
I think it's page
in the
14, is
land
it?
use, the policies in the land
Policies.
use section, so
Yeah,
page 4 and
Yeah.
beginning of land use is a chunk of stuff.
yeah. This is the only place though, in the first place in here that was the comment, the development, it was really in defining the steep slope. And so, I think that the steep slope for, has been defined in most town plans for this between 15 and potentially 25 as a very steep slope. And so that is what we went with, of saying one or the other. We have more work to do to determine what it is. It certainly doesn't, there's certainly, we understand that technology allows people to bolt things into the sides of mountains, into steep cliffs, etc. But in terms of siting of this and the protection of down people who live down below those steep slopes and issues of groundwater, this is what we believed was the responsible thing. I know, Ernie, you may have comments on this. Or Jan?
Well, just two things. One, to Ernie's point before, is at some point we would want to justify. You'd want to say, here's the proposed change, and here's the reasoning for it. And sometimes the reasoning is just to clarify the language to make it definitive. But on something like steep slopes, there may be other justification. So that's one point. And the other would be a note that says, when at all possible, we want this to be consistent with the subdivision regs and the zoning bylaws.
I tell if Ernie's on another call. Okay.
But I don't think we need, for the purposes of tonight, which is to go get something ready for the planning commission, I don't think we need to put a little justification note at each change. I think
Okay,
that would just be too much preparation. We should get it in front of the whole group and the public in that forum, and talk it through first.
Okay. Ernie, we're just talking about the steep slope comment. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, please.
No, I just had to take a call, as a matter of fact, about a solar installation that is on land I own in Massachusetts. A large
Okay.
one, much larger than these.
Okay. So you see down below another suggestion that land designated for development of solar energy generation systems must be exempt from limitations based on visual consideration, provided the solar panels do not rise above the tree line on visually prominent ridge lines. That just comments on that from the Solar Siting Commission.
Well, I would ask the question and to the group. It's sort of both sides of it. Linda put it in her comments, which is accurate, I believe, to the state law, where you can't have different rules for solar than for other development, or you would say development is not allowed on slopes above a certain amount, and solar is one type of development. So there's a certain consistency there where you have to treat development consistently, not just do something special for solar that's not warranted. So that's one side of the coin. But if you flip the coin around and say, wait, a solar project is exempt from limitations that are put on other developments, then I'm not sure that works by the first argument. If you have to treat development consistently, then that means you have to treat development consistently both ways.
Linda Gray. You're on mute. You're on mute, Linda.
Thank you, sorry. I want to call your attention to my comments, which are highlighting the guidance from the Department of Public Service, which makes the point that Jan was just summarizing. And so I feel that that's a very important thing. And I think you need to pay attention to that if you, as you expressed before, if you want to have this be an enhanced energy plan. And so I feel like you got to take this seriously and not put restrictions on solar that don't apply to other development.
So
Mary
just
Albert, okay,
a
yeah.
question, Linda, then to follow up on that. You can't put restrictions on solar that aren't on other development. Can you put exemptions on solar that aren't exempted on other development? That to me seems like the same thing and a positive rather than negative. You see what I mean?
And what exemptions are you considering?
The one that we're just discussing that Mary just read, which was from Mary Albert's suggestion of exempting solar projects from visual limitations,
Considerations.
screening, whatever. Is that even possible for the same reason?
You'll have to ask others who are experts in planning, but it seems to me that the key thing that you've proposed a variety of restrictions on solar that you're not considering for other development. And I believe that's the crux of the issue that I would point out to you that it's like, no, you can't do that. And there's not good logic for doing that.
I want to ask, is it okay to ask Linda a question?
Please, go ahead. Yeah.
When the planning, I should say the subdivision and zoning regulations are rife with sort of things can't be built of this particular scale or of this particular, more importantly, things can't be built of a particular type in this particular place. I mean, that's pretty much what zoning is all about. And so I'm not quite clear about how that plays, because that's the law too, how that plays with what you were just talking about. So
Right.
there are exemptions, not exemptions, there are prohibitions of certain types of development in certain places that are not do not apply to other things.
I'm just trying to write it for the minutes, and I think the point is a good one to say certainly zoning bylaws distinguish between different types of development.
Yes.
And a different rule, whether it's a 3-story house or something that's
How
got
many acres you need or how many whatever.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
We would definitely need clarification to say what's possible. Clearly,
I mean,
justified good distinctions between different developments is part and parcel of the land.
A lot of certain a large number of commercial types of development are simply not permitted in parts of the town, period. Even though housing is developed, is encouraged, is permitted in those places, and different types of housing and so on. So, solar is in some ways the same. It has to be treated the same, as in it can be exempted from certain places. I mean, I prohibited from certain places.
Linda, did you want to respond? Yeah.
I think that the answer to this, you're posing a kind of conundrum or paradox. I think the answer is that energy siting in general is not in town hands. It's in state hands. And so, but there are some limited areas in which the state is saying the town can try to set out some guidelines. And so I think that's what you guys are discovering now.
So
Mary
at
Albert?
the very, at the
Yeah,
very
yeah.
least, we need guidance, we would need guidelines of those specifics to say what, because I have read the things that relate to kind of what Linda's saying, which is you cannot put particular restrictions on solar. And it is pulled out specially. Solar is treated differently than
Yep.
other types of development. And so it would be very helpful to get real specific guidance about that.
Mary Albert?
Yeah, my comment came from what we'll get to later in the session is a thing saying that glare is an important thing. Glare is a visual impact from the sun going across a shiny object. We in Norwich don't have any regulations against glare from metal roofs or picture windows or anything like that. So I think my comment was intended that whatever you don't like, whether you don't like the shape of the panel, or you don't like it, you don't like the look of it, that's irrelevant. And the same for glare. I think that's I think it's in line with Linda's statement. They have to consider everything the same thing. Okay, so glare is not a special thing for solar. And there's only so far you can go with, I don't like the looks of that. Thank you.
I don't think anyone said I don't like the looks of things. Did anyone hear that? I think it's really about glare we're talking about. Jay's had his hand up. Okay, go ahead, Jan. But
I just want to point, I don't know exactly, we'd have to go back and look at the subdivision the zoning bylaws, but I think under the definitions and permitting instructions for ridgeline, you can look at the visuals of a house, like a great big glass house on a ridgeline would be treated differently than a wooden house without glass. So in that sense, there's something about glare in the ridgeline, but again, that's the bylaws, not the plan. And we got to keep track of that.
Ernie and then Jay. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that the glare becomes something of a safety issue under some circumstances. Also, not every circumstance that's got glare is safety issue by any stretch. But, depending on where it is and what it's aimed at, it could be a hazard. So you'd have to consider that. And these are things that you could put into, just at least as a general philosophy or general explanation. These are things that could be put into the town plan. Saying if it causes a hazard, which I think is a different thing than I just don't like the look of it. If it, and I don't even know if it can cause a hazard, but I mean,
Jay?
sure.
Yeah, sorry.
So first of all, I appreciate the pragmatism of this group, and what I sort of hear underlying out of a lot of this, and I say it with a smile on my face, is we're almost coming back to how can we have the standards for solar being the same standards as other development, period. And I think that's a really interesting thing to look at. Does it aesthetically match what we're trying to do? Does it meet the needs of that space in terms of development and how we do development? So number one, it's just interesting listening to this conversation. And I think personally, a lot of the over the last year or two of being more involved in this issue, Achita that has been created for me is, why can you not build a large house somewhere, but you can do a solar field somewhere, or vice versa? And having that consistency, I think, is really important. And so I appreciate the direction of this conversation. Number two, I think, at times a lot of people refer to Act 250 and the Queechee rule. And for those that have been in the Upper Valley for quite a while, you might remember the case of the condominiums in Queechee on the uphill side of Route 4 as you drove through Woodstock that got Act 250 approval, and they built them and they put in skylights. And the skylights weren't in the approval plan, and they created glare. Now, whether or not that glare was a hazard or not, but it was different than the plan. And it was different than the approved plan. And Act 250 ultimately forced Queechee Lakes to remove those skylights and go back to a normal roof line. So I think I'm encouraging of this conversation to say, almost more so, what are the standards for development that we want for our community? And how do we apply them towards different uses? Whether or not, it shouldn't matter whether or not it's a solar site or a small house or a mega mansion. What are the rules that they apply to?
John?
Well, so our challenge, I agree, and I think that that's the most consistent and the best way to do it. Our challenge is when we look at our tools, subdivision regs, zoning bylaws, and town plan, we do a whole lot of stuff really specifically in the zoning bylaws on lots of different kinds of development. Because of the way the state laws work with solar renewable energy projects, there are things that have to be in the plan, town plan, specific to solar. Now, we could try and be that specific, or at least consistent with the other tools. But there is a unique aspect of the town plan relative to solar development, renewable development compared to others. And that's part of what drove us to be talking uniquely about solar rather than kind of consistently across all development.
Ernie?
Well, Jan said a lot of what I was going to say, but I think what we're dealing with here is, on one hand, the state wants something done it wants a certain outcome. They want a certain amount of solar and all that sort of stuff. And they're kind of saying, and we don't really care what the town's got. This is what we want, and this is a deal in state, so you got to do what we say. And I think we're stuck between that and the fact that, first of all, second of all, a lot of us want this stuff, but we're trying to work our way around it. I mean, in this conversation, I'm thinking, well, we'd have no problem saying you can't have a slaughterhouse in a whole bunch of places, you know, or even a big construction yard, or, you know, a local contractor wanting to plop it in the middle of a forest block or something. I mean, you really wouldn't be allowed to do that stuff. So you know, we have this tug of war between solar, which is getting special treatment really by the state, and other things. And I think we got to, you know, I don't really have any. All I know is that I'm aware of that constantly, and it both is a problem but an opportunity too, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next comment, you know, I went through the document. We did one initial edit to it, and then went through it again with the lens of, let's just make sure any edits we made are very specifically focused on regulatory review. And in that process, I eliminated a number of edits that I initially made, and then I eliminated some edits that came from the community. And so you can see on this page 16, this is not the comment that is highlighted, just again, for being transparent, is not something that would be able to be reviewed as we were looking at a specific project. It's really a statement of goal from the community. And so because of that, we really wanted to have statements, changes in here that were really focused on the regulatory matter.
I think the summary document that has the one line there that says we're proposing specifically identifying either mapped land parcels or criteria where it's preferred and encouraged, gets to that, but it doesn't, there's not a number there.
Mm-hmm.
Linda's comment, which talks about a factor required for our goals times a sort of a multiplier, because you don't know, you never get all the sites that you identify, gets at a number. So what you're saying is, right now, we're not going to put a number down, a specific number. We're saying we want to identify the areas. I do think that as part of the process, we're gonna want to look at goals, targets, and a mapping exercise and so forth that says, oh, look, we need X number of acres with present technology or X number of megawatts of generation. And here is what the mapping exercise shows with these constraints. And that's part of the whole exercise. But right now, it seems appropriate to me that you simply say, as it says in the summary, we're proposing more specifically prohibiting in certain locations and more specifically encouraging in other ones.
Yes, and I think that it's, again, it is, again, the goal of this revision is not to rewrite the town plan, but is to give guidance to the planning commission as we review projects. And so if we are moving away from saying the whole town's a preferred site and saying we want to go and identify those sites, then let's go identify those sites and see how many acres they are. And if people want to get 200 as a goal, then have at it, work to do that. But right now, it really is thinking about how do we review projects. Linda.
Thank you. So I would encourage you all, earlier in your discussion, it seemed that you were agreeing that you did want to have an enhanced energy plan. I would encourage you to adopt that as your goal and head toward that. And then assuming that you do that, then I want to direct you to like, there were 2 points that I made in my comments that come directly from the guidance on 2024 guidance on enhanced energy planning standards. And so I want to direct you to those to say, hey, so you have to pay attention to these points, which is identifying sufficient land to meet our targets, and then also treating all like any limitations you make, if you designate certain land as unsuitable for all development, then that means it's okay to designate that land as unsuitable for some renewable energy development. So I want to just say, I encourage you to decide on going for an enhanced energy plan. And then if you do that, I want to remind you that you got to pay attention to these details.
And I just would like to say, I know Jan talked about the enhanced energy plan as something that's a goal of the group or a goal of his goal for a planning commission. I don't know that it has been reviewed. Jan, has it been discussed in the whole planning commission? Because I don't believe it has been. And so
it has
maybe.
been in this
Yeah.
subcommittee previously got to the conclusion that yes, we wanted to
Okay.
go for an EEP because it would give us substantial deference it's part of the rubric basically to say,
Yeah.
if we do that, we will get more influence on these kinds of projects in town. So we the subcommittee said and I would have added actually to the summary here, and I'm just making a note to say the proposal is to go for an enhanced energy plan. And to Linda's point, that definitely includes just what we've been talking about, this specificity both ways, not here, yes, here. And that's it's all of a piece. It's all what we've been talking about. There's definitely not a contradiction between trying to do an EEP and the changes we're proposing. You just have to do both sides of it.
Yeah. Rob Gear?
It seems to me that an enhanced energy plan, it would be quite beneficial if that was a precursor to setting any additional clarifications to the town plan's energy chapters, that everything that is you're looking to consider and to add some clarity to would be answered by an enhanced energy plan and could be referred to in the town plan. And it just makes much more sense to make sure that that happens first. and you work off of that rather than, well, let's pick this little item because that I can grasp that, I can make that fit in a small enough package that it won't choke the electorate in their adoption of any changes.
I think the goal is, I think it's one and the same. You're doing, you're making changes that get you to be able to have an enhanced energy plan. And that is exactly what we're talking about. You know, that we may be doing it in steps to say, okay, let's make sure we have agreement on this and changes on that. But there's no point in saying we want an enhanced energy plan and then doing 1/10 of the changes required and going through the entire process through the select board and public hearings and everything without coming close to having an enhanced energy plan. So I think we're all talking about the same thing. We're talking about that total effort that gets you an EEP with specificity.
Right. But I think the goal in getting specificity on these things right now is to give clarity to this group where there has not been clarity. There wasn't clarity when we looked at the, when the group looked at the proposal for New Boston Road in a forest block to put a solar facility. There was lack of clarity about what specifically how do we review it? There was certainly a lack of clarity for those of you who have read the discussion of Rod Francis during the Upper Loveland Road project. And so clarity is needed, and we'll work on both of them and work to get it so that the commission has clarity about what its role is and what it is not, and so that applicants know how their projects are going to be viewed. Jay.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the enhanced energy plan, so forgive me on this question, but Linda, when you were talking about it, it sounded like as part of that, you do some sort of designation of land that's particularly targeted or earmarked towards that. And I guess there's a little bit of a chicken or egg question, but do you say you have to produce that much energy, therefore you have to identify the land? Or is it the other way around, that you identify what land might be suitable and say, therefore, our capacity might be XYZ? And it goes back to Rob's and my comments about Moore's Law and about technology changing and whatnot, is it might not necessarily be an acreage or an amount of land. So I just want to caution about saying, oh, we have to identify X number of acres, or we have to do XYZ. As part of coming up with a plan from that. And that just may be my naivete, but just the red flag went up slightly for me on that.
Let me try, Linda, and then you correct. My understanding is to have an enhanced energy plan that will be approved by the regional commission, which is what has to happen. You have what are essentially per capita renewable energy generation targets. It'll say you have 3,300 people in Norwich. That means you need 16 megawatts of renewable energy generation by 2030, whatever the date is. And then your enhanced energy plan has to propose a credible way of getting there. And so theoretically, your proposal could be technology will happen, and so we need this many acres to get to that goal versus this many. But the bottom line is you need a credible story for how you're going to hit a generation target in megawatts. Is that accurate, Linda?
Yes, I think that's very accurate. I would just suggest, Jay, look at the packet at my comments. I quote from the Department of Public Service 2024 guidance for enhanced energy planning standards. So one of their standards is, does the plan identify sufficient land in the municipality for renewable energy development to reasonably reach the 2050 targets for renewable energy generation? So yeah, they're wanting regions for their regional plans and towns for their town plans to get serious about it and identify, hey, how are you going to do your share of renewable energy generation within your town boundaries?
So just in comment then, therefore, I'm correct then in hearing that regardless of whether or not the town has applicable land for solar, to get an enhanced energy plan, you have to identify enough land to hit those targeted energy goals, period.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. We talked
Okay.
about it a little bit before, where clearly the towns are different.
Yeah.
And some towns are flat and some towns are not, and some
Right.
towns, have a big brownfield and some don't. And so at some point, there must be regional considerations that come in and say, okay, this town, for obvious good reasons, can do more and this one can do less, and we're going to make sense of it. But simplistically, you start with each basically per capita, and
Yeah,
then
okay.
it goes from there.
That's helpful. And what I don't know, and I haven't done the math, is it could be it's such a small percentage of the land that it doesn't matter. But I'm just trying to grasp the high level thought of saying, yes, what it says is if you want to do an EEP, you have to identify this much land in order to produce
Yep.
that energy per capita that you're talking, that Linda, you and Jan are talking about. Understood. Thank you.
I'm just looking for where, I don't know whether there are additional edits that people are seeing in this first section that they want to discuss. Otherwise, I'm looking on page 35 is the next group of edits.
The other point, just to put it, and I put it under open questions in the summary, but I think the idea of using districts and there's you name something in the edits, and industrial/energy area, or I mean, you can call it whatever you want. That may be a useful tool. There's a difference between particular sites, this parcel, versus this area, and it is certainly a possible tool to use a new zoning district. Because in the summary statement, what I said was our current zoning district that is kind of commercial industrial isn't, those boundaries are not set because it's good for solar. It's got traffic, it's close to the highways, it's got other commercial entities and so forth. So it might be a useful tool for us to say, oh, let's come up with a new zoning district, area, whatever you want to call it, and have criteria for how we select it. It may not be contiguous, it may be different spots around town. It has to do with three-phase power and so on. And then use that as part of our crafting of the plan. And that's just mentioned on page 9 of the plan, or page 21 of the packet.
And it shows up again a little bit later as well. Any comments?
Comments on which section?
What he was just talking about that.
Right.
So yeah, so we've moved now to the second half, to the energy part, which there's not, as I noted, there was some comments on page 34 that were oh, I mean, there are comments throughout the whole thing. And this is really defining the land where you would see these, and getting at this idea of we would, that there would be an effort to go and identify the land where these could be.
When you say page 34, do you mean of the PDF or that?
I'm not
or
looking at the the packet,
Yeah,
excuse me.
the
Yeah,
pack, yeah, the PDF. I'm
Pack-
looking,
the packet,
PDF
the
page.
PDF, but
yeah,
yeah,
so I see page 21 of the town plan, the first page of the energy chapter is page 34 of the packet, I
Right.
think. So just a
My packet
question,
is 31.
the question to the group, on energy plan policy 32H, where it says must be located in the industrial area. What's our definition? Do we have a definition somewhere of industrial
no,
area?
No,
no, this was part of the kind of the concept of we need to identify where these would go. I think that's what we're talking about. We need to identify preferred areas and identify those areas somehow. So, that is the kind of the work to be done. Ernie.
So
I think,
sorry, Ernie, just while I'm trying to catch that. So back to link that to what we said before, because I could say, oh, don't call it an industrial area, call it a preferred siting area, which would then be treating solar, special.
Right. So you call it industrial and let different,
Or you are allowed to treat it special because the state tells you to treat it special. I don't know, but we just need to be consistent and be clear about that. Sorry, Ernie.
that's okay. What I was going to say is we could just simply say that instead of, we could either say it's in certain zones, which is what the industrial area would generally imply. Except that we don't really have an industrial area in the
we
town.
don't, yeah, we'd have to define that.
So, but what we could do is we could say in the area, and because on one hand, we are expected to treat solar as a little bit special. We could say that solar should be, or however you want to say it, must be placed. I'm not sure if it should be mandated. I'm trying to wrap my head around the language for, but it had that certain landforms, and maybe population characteristics and whatever, would be a way to describe the proper place to have it. Probably what do they call the power lines, the type of power lines?
Three-phase.
Yeah, three-phase. Okay, I should have known three-phase. Three-phase, where there are three-phase lines, we could use that as an identifier of the kinds of place that can have them, stuff like that. And I've not listed in the exhaustive list of the qualities of the places, but I'm just saying, you instead of saying by zone or any kind of or anything like that, say places that have these qualities, we could use that instead.
I think that's really the intention. Let's identify places where they could go and call that out. And if you call it a industrial zone, if you describe it in a particular way, or if you say in
the
this
solar
map,
zone.
the other thing, Matt, Ernie, you love maps. Let's create a map and say, here's a map that identifies the areas where these can go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's an overlay. It's an overlay exercise.
But we would define those places by not just picking a place on the map, but by saying they have these qualities.
Criteria.
Right,
Yeah, you'd
right.
have a set of criteria. Three-phase, distance to three-phase.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Slope, priority forest block, and you'd
Yeah.
do these overlays, and you'd say, oh, and we still have
Right.
this is the area left over, or this is the
Right.
area that works, that meets
Right.
those criteria.
Thanks. Linda?
Hi, on this same section, you've added in the historic village district, and you've added in and forest blocks are as basically areas to not locate solar. I would encourage you, as I understand it, Two Rivers is making a distinction between priority forest areas and regular forest areas. And I would encourage you to do
Mhm.
the same, like, because in their letter to Aaron Lamperti denying preferred site designation for his property, it's because it was priority forest block. And they specifically said, hey, on the eastern part of town in Norwich, there are other forest blocks, and they would be, and Two Rivers would be fine with solar development in those areas. So I'd encourage you to follow that lead.
Thank you. Rob Gear?
Yeah, as a general member of the public, a layman, I find the term industrial is pejorative, and it speaks to an attitude that shows up in many of these edits. And I'm just making that comment. It's an observation. It's not anything that needs to be denied or endorsed.
What language you prefer?
It's some sort of a specific descriptive term for a zone where
It
solar is
could be,
permitted.
I mean, the way it is in other town plans, I would put forth is either it's, you can have preferred, you can use the term preferred, you know, net renewable generation preferred area or something like that, where you have that whole three-tiered system that we talked about that several other towns use. Prohibited, allowed with mitigation, and preferred are three different areas for these types of projects. So in that case,
None of them are pejorative.
yeah, and that's common, and it's certainly in some of the example plans we looked at.
Yeah, it's very typical language in many of them. So it was no intention to be pejorative. I'm sorry people, or I'm sorry you, Robert, felt that way. It was not intended. Additional comments? And Linda, you mentioned the historic district. That has always been in the in there. That was not an addition. I just wanted to make sure.
I was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
quoting
Just
the
in getting the
language, so
space,
you
yeah.
knew what I was reading.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah,
Yeah, historic
because that
has
had always been in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Um,
we definitely want to emphasize, or we want to acknowledge the level of work around definition of scenic
Yeah.
areas. I put it as, you know, it says to be defined is called out in the edits. I put it in the summary to be defined. We talked about it specifically in the subcommittee that it's necessary and it's a pile of work. And if you saw what I announced at the last planning commission meeting, where we have now the zoning maps on the listers interactive map, that includes the current scenic road map. So that's the thing we're talking about updating. So if you go to the listers interactive map and click on scenic, you will see a very few places in town shown as designated scenic. We're talking about an exercise to update that. And I think it's good to acknowledge that that's necessary and a pretty sizable chunk of work.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that in doing that, we need to be mindful of the correlation that can sometimes occur between what's defined as scenic and what is defined as high income areas in our town, and be careful of that. Be careful of privilege.
Well, I think the criteria to do anything like a new scenic map or designation, you're gonna have criteria that says this is what it means. And I would certainly hope that it doesn't say, you know, the average house price is thus and such, or the, you know, that's just not one of the criteria that's used.
Jay?
So
I think this is one of those places where, and I think you said it earlier, Jan, and we were talking about of just the alignment of zoning and solar siting and other things like that, is that if you should be allowed to build a house there, why can't you put solar there, or vice versa? And I wonder how much even calling out scenic is necessary. Because it's really, and a lot of the criteria is about whether or not it's viewed from a road. It shouldn't matter if it's viewed from a scenic road or whatnot, because scenic becomes very subjective unless you do the exercise that you're talking about.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments about this section? Much of it is similar to things we've discussed in the past hour and a half. Kind of ensuring consistency around glare. We've had that conversation, and other. Don't think there's anything new, Jan, in terms of your list of what's included in your list. How
Yeah,
to do that.
I haven't seen a need to change other than moving projects over 500 kW up above the line, and making a note about EEP being part of the, one of the goals of this process. I don't have other changes to my summary, but it seems to me like we're at a decent place to say you clean up anything that changed on that PDF. I'll clean up the summary. I'll do the minutes. And then this subcommittee is asking for a block of time on the agenda of the next PC meeting.
Linda has her hand up. I want to thank you, but I just want to acknowledge that, Linda.
Thanks very much. So if I have comments on the edits that are on page 43 of the packet, the PDF
Okay,
page.
let's go there.
And
Yeah.
so that includes glare, and that includes projects larger than 500 kW are not permitted. And I just want to say, I think that mention of glare is inappropriate to pull that out. And I also disagree with prohibiting projects greater than 500 kW.
Thank you. I think those edits, we can iterate those concerns or those in purple on this page to make sure they don't get lost. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I think at this point, because I would have to think it through myself and say, okay, because I don't think the 500 kW is a hard and fast must prohibit to the point of, if we had a really good 12-acre site and we could put a megawatt on it, I wouldn't think that's terribly out of character in Norwich necessarily. So right now, if I had to vote on this, I wouldn't necessarily vote to prohibit all 500 kW and above, but that's not the stage we're at. We're not voting about that line. So as long as we have, to your point, both sides or all sides, all comments captured, then it goes to the planning commission. Planning commission decides how it wants to proceed. At some point, we make decisions and distill it down and submit something specific for public comment and then select board. But that's right now we can be inclusive rather than isolate it down to one idea.
Ernie.
Yeah, I think what I would like to know and hear is where does it says projects larger than 500 kilowatts not prohibited. Now we know whether that's a problematic statement right there, but what makes any particular size problematic? I mean, I'm not. What would make it problematic? Is it acreage? Is it simply its appearance? I don't. There's. I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around, because I know we're supposed to. I've forgotten what the number is, but we're supposed to have some number of megawatts installed in this town to meet our share. I can't remember what
Roughly, Linda can correct me, but I think it's like 16 megawatts.
Yeah, 16. I mean, because I mean, so what we're talking about is on the order of about 80 acres, if we're talking about that. 80 to 100 acres, maybe not even that much. I happen to know that a little over 2 megawatts is about 12 acres. So I'm just trying to find out what it is that makes any given size inappropriate. And I think that would be really helpful for us to determine in,
Right,
no
right.
time.
And I think
I think there
that's
needs
the-
to be more work. Yeah.
Right, and that's,
mean,
so I
let's-
think you go to the PC and you say, okay, one of the what are the chunks of work that need to be done? And they may very well kick it back to the subcommittee quite quickly and say, do those chunks. But one of the clear chunks is to establish the criteria that define appropriate sites for preferred solar.
But how do we get away from being arbitrary and capricious? Making those, just sort of subjective.
I mean, the
That's what I'm
criteria
trying to
has to be
figure out. How do we do
justified.
that?
It has to say, here's why. Does it have this impact on wildlife? Does it have this, this is the erosion or.
I mean, there are certain sites that can't be built, where you can't put it, which would be forest blocks, wetlands, things like that. I mean, those clearly are
Yeah.
untouchable by anybody for anything, just about.
And then you have three-phase power and things like that
Right.
that pull it in one way or another. So I think that's clearly a piece of the work, is to do that, though not capricious criteria for preferred siting areas.
Right. I think that's really what we've been talking about. Let's try to identify those areas, put a map together, and then share that. And then determine, okay, well, does size matter, right? Or not? And then
Yeah. Okay. So does anybody have anything specific that we need to address before we have something to send to the PC? Okay.
I think we've got, let's just see the rest of the agenda.
Just minutes.
Yeah, the minutes. Okay.
It's what's the date on the minutes?
The minutes, May 28th.
Okay, so
Packet.
I'd move to approve the minutes for May 28th, 2024.
Second. All approve?
I have to
Oh, you
abstain.
weren't there. You weren't there, right?
Right.
Okay.
All right. Well, then the
And-
second carries it.
Any additional public comment? Okay, great. Let's adjourn.
Move to adjourn. All right.
Thank you.
All right, I'll put it on the draft agenda for the July PC meeting.
Thank you. Thanks
Okay.
all. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.